Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Face Off. My name is Hi-Rez Bart. That guy's Hi-Rez Dry Bear or Mortality Esports as he was in the last game. And welcome to the Face Off, where we literally remove our faces and die here on the camera for you.
Well, you don't necessarily die. I mean, just face comes off, and then that's just, you really see a good source of your face. I mean, obviously, this is the mask, and once that gets removed, it comes on off here. But that's right, you're joining us for Face Off. This is the show where we talk very jadedly about things that involve Smite Esports and Smite competitive gaming. And today, we just finished the first two matches of the Pro League as I turned to this other camera thing, and now we're going to be going into Face Off to discuss a couple things. Our first topic, though, is Walk It Off, which is now Mortality Esports, and we had a very, very intricate joke that went along with this is now ruined because they changed their name, but this topic was supposed to be Walk It Off. Do they have legs?
Oh, yeah, that's right. They cut that off.
The joke is ruined.
Cut off the legs.
It's ruined.
It was such a good one. Does Walk It Off have legs? It was a great topic name, and production totally screwed the pooch on that one, guys.
Mortality Esports, what is their lifespan?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a good follow-up right there.
Okay.
Does Mortality? What's the heartbeat of Mortality Esports? But okay, so realistically, looking at the game they just played versus TSM,
right?
Looked pretty good. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this team, formerly Bloody Tech, and then Bloody Tech plus Sayo was called Walk It Off.
That's right.
And then they got sponsored by Mortality Esports after their inclusion into the Pro League. And the roster is Sayo, Moex, Frezzy, iRaffer, and Fexes. And they looked great today.
They did. They definitely looked really good. I think TSM was the favorite going in. Now, obviously, there's a couple connection issues with TSM, but none of them actually influenced the game itself. It was just more of a nuisance for TSM. There was no, kills lost or anything like that. So really, it all just shows that Mortality can shine. Now, when C9 exploded and C9 left, or Sayo left, I just call him C9 because I guess that's what's in my mind anyway. Right. But going into it, Sayo left and started joining his own team, making his own team. He took Moex and Fexes, which I personally believe were the two players that were carrying Bloody Tech when it used to be Bloody Tech. Those players really showed how well they can play. iRaf originally from I5, one of the best players there as well. So we kind of culminated all the best players from around the play-ins
those
and the
4th,
qualifiers.
5th, 6th kind of place teams.
Yeah, I just brought it together and just said, hey, let's make a dream team, and they're working really well. TSM got conquered there, and I definitely am going to go say that Mortality's got it going.
Mortality, do they have legs? Can they walk it off?
They
look really good. They look really good. And looking at their matchups for the rest of the week, Mortality does beat TSM. They have another game on Friday here where they go up against Cloud9 this time, who did have that crazy turn around on to the boys from SK, and what a game that was. But so looking at it, let's go ahead and take a look at the roster changes that we've had so far here in the Smite, right before the Smite Pro League. So this, primarily, we're going to be talking about the Cloud9 kind of split and what that means. So we already talked a little bit about Sayo leaving Cloud9, going to Mortality Esports. Cloud9 also basically comes back with only 2 of their remaining roster players in Youngbay and NQ. Right. And then over on the North American side, Dignitas really splitting up and their players getting fragmented, but not really getting included on the teams just yet. What did you think about the new Cloud9 today?
Honestly, I think Cloud9 looked really sharp, and Sayo is always going to be a staple on whatever team he's on. Moex stands on his own as well as a Hunter player. He never really makes many mistakes, as we saw in the last match, shining just as much as Railsy X did in the last match before that. Fex has, of course, a very powerful mid laner. In fact, he beat Lobster in almost every single category in that mid lane. That's not an easy thing to do. It's Lobster's a very powerful player. But I want to talk a little bit about North America, and this is something that's been going on for quite a while, right? Obviously, about a month and a half ago, there's some inklings about Anatoly not being part of the team anymore. Anatoly ended up being removed from the solo lane position and put into a managerial position for Team Dignitas, and Xing came in as a solo laner. Now we have even more upsets. For those who are not following the competitive scene, we have, of course, Shadow Q is no longer on the starting lineup, and of course, the best has left the team. And so standing in for the best is Gnaw, a player who has almost no competitive experience at all, but is very good, been around for a very long time, high-ranked player, very good friends of the Dignitas lineup. And then, of course, we have Shadow Q. Shadow Q, and this is what's so hard, right? Shadow Q was the glue that made the left side of the map work, or the right side of the map, right? He's the one that was really kind of like supporting, he would fill in for holes and kind of make the wards happen. So I'm really curious to see where, with Daredecare stepping in for Shadow Q, how that's going to change the long lane dynamic with Zapman, because Derek and Shadow Q are very different players. Shadow Q is a very supportive player. He's very, he likes to cater to to people on his team, and also makes a lot of amazing plays. As we see from him, he's one of the few support players who's almost always in the highlight reel because of the way he plays. Whereas Derek, very hyper aggressive, likes to get in there, initiate, start the fights, which kind of goes well with Zapman. So,
I don't know. Does that lane really need another Zapman though?
What I'm predicting is a lot more kills and a lot more deaths.
I'm predicting just a lot more deaths. I'm predicting Dignitas falling off of the North American scene for sure. I think that Lassus has been underperforming, and I think that Dare to Care is, like you said, a much more aggressive style of support, and I'm not sure that lane can sustain it. It might work, and if it works, it's going to be really brilliant, but I don't see it working for long. I see it very much like a torch is burning too brightly with those two players in the same lane. They'll run out of fuel before we go too long. Looking back at the European scene here, Emilito filling in for what was Half Devil's position on Cloud9 looked pretty good today.
He did.
Hyrox seemed to have a little bit of trouble. Granted, it was a very, very concentrated style of gameplay from SK to shut him down, knowing that maybe he's a little bit out of practice. And Optics in the mid looked amazing on Yanis. I mean, he played fantastically well today.
Honestly, I going into this had no faith in Hyrox. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I mean, realistically, since his days on the Copenhagen Wolves, he has never really recovered. He came back after that about 6 months ago and did nothing. He was not hitting his skill shots. He wasn't there, played on Coast. Nothing really surprising about that. Hyrox has not been fully invested in the Smite scene for a very long time, and I'm surprised to see him come back. In fact, one of the reasons why I didn't really put my faith into C9, of course, not really expecting to see him being played at all, is the fact that I don't think that he's a strong player anymore, and I think he misses too many of the fundamentals for him to be a good platform to sit on. So my vote does not go towards Hyrox, and I'm surprised to see him being picked up at all. But that, him
and Young Bay have a long history together, so
that's true. Very true.
Seems like a lot of. So guys, we apologize if you are having connectivity issues. It seems to be looks good on our end. Sorry if it is not getting it out to you. But yeah, I mean, and looking back at the final word on North America, with Team Dignitas, Xing in the solo lane, very aggressive player, tends to die a lot.
Right.
If he gets kills, great. He can snowball, but we haven't seen Xing be a dominant force in North America for some time in terms of snowball victories out of the jungle. Can he perform in the solo lane, in a lane that can actually snowball faster than the jungle can in terms of your direct opposition, right? Like, you're only really seeing junglers get really far behind opposite junglers in cases of extreme invades, like we saw in the first game today in Europe. And then Lassus, he's been, the workhorse for the team.
That's right.
And it doesn't look like he's quite as effective, at least in the last LAN tournaments, in the last few weeks of online play. Maybe they've got it together. Zapman with a super aggressive support. I feel like the team is just going to get overextended, and they're gonna lose on the back of that, of playing hyper aggressive. Of course, we will see that a little bit later this evening, guys. So be sure to stick around for that.
The way I look at it with Lassus is it's the same thing he's always been, right? We are looking at a player who he doesn't really have. He's not a theory crafter. He's not the kind of person that gets down to the numbers and grinds it out, tries to counter this item or counter that item. Lassus is he's a sportsman. He just likes to use his natural reactions. He's built in. I mean, he doesn't think about it, but at the same time, the way he plays is that, I'm under attack. He doesn't, process in my mind, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. His body, his mental and instincts are so good that when he gets under pressure, he always makes the right decision, and his plays are incredible. And so that's why Lassus works. But we're getting to the point now where Smite is starting to elevate itself to a more complex game. There's more things to look at, and the way Lassus is working is that he's not practicing 24/7 to get those instincts sharp. He's not going to outthink the enemy player. He's not going to theory craft the enemy players, not be able to counter the individual aspects to make players good, and so that's why we're not seeing Lassus perform. So Lassus really needs to get to the grindstone and start grinding out his movements, his thoughts, the way he gets into the game, the way he prepares himself when he starts falling behind, or he's going to keep performing the way he's been performing. I mean, realistically, Zapman and Lassus were the two most underperformed characters or players in the NA Pro League kickoff LAN. They did not perform well at all by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, those two players had more deaths than any other player that performed in that 20-player stretch. They just were not at a high level in the NA Pro League kickoff LAN, and now that we're in the Pro League, they really have to come out to shine. We're going to be seeing them later today to see what they can do, but this really, I mean, players underperforming and overperforming and really just performing in general really brings us to the next topic, which is going to be play-in results. The teams that came out of the play-ins, who do you think is the strongest team?
Out of the play-ins, well, let's take a look at the actual teams that did make it in. You have the Fat Chunks assembling.
That's right.
You have Team Ratchet, a.k.a. Thirst, which is Wolfie's team.
That's right.
You have Exposed Secrets, and you have Mortality, formerly Walk It Off. The team that's the strongest coming out of the Pro League, it's tough for me not to go with Exposed Secrets. Just the players on that team individually, all very, very, very strong. And, I mean, they looked just great throughout the play-ins, and I have high hopes for this team to go deep.
You know, honestly, I think Mortality is even a little better than them, and realistically, for the long game, I get my vote onto Mortality just because once they start really coalescing their team play and their camaraderie as a group of players, they're going to start to shine so brightly just because there's a lot of talent there, and once they figure out how to do it, it's all going to come together here. Now, of course, Fat Chick Simple definitely came out strong, and one thing that we should say about Thirst, previously Five Angry Men, is they lost a player right before, and now they're trying to figure out how they're going to do it. I mean, of course, their jungler is not going to be El Borchacho is not going to be available for 5 of their 20 matches, and so they're not really going to have that kind of synergy. They're going to be back and forth, and they also have Wolfie, who has never performed. I mean, he's been on competitive teams, but the teams he's been on have never done well.
That's right. Wolfie, kind of almost like the proxy QQ kind of player, constantly starting teams doing well, looking very promising, and then kind of falling apart. But Exposed Secrets, like we were saying, the Shadow Nightmare and kind of Fun Ball, and really the original kind of core of the Coast team that we saw, really what the team that got invited to the launch tournament, not what actually showed up, but those guys coming together and looking pretty strong. Plus, the former jungler from Cloud9 going to be holding down the jungle for them as well. So all across the board, strong European players. But I think that the European playing team's looking a little bit stronger than the North American playing teams so far. But
much more competition there. Definitely.
Yeah, there seems to be. I mean, there seems to be 6 very strong teams in Europe, and in North America there is some divide there, and a lot of it comes down to really setting the tempo for the North American scene is going to be Cognitive Red versus Dignitas, which is going to be our first game coming to you guys. I'm sorry, the second game coming to you guys in this. No, I was right the first game. At 7:30 today. In just about 3.5 hours, we'll have Cog Red versus Team Dignitas coming up for you. A rematch of the finals of the North American Pro League Kickoff LAN back just a couple of months ago, where Cognitive Red took out Dignitas in pretty dominant fashion.
3-1.
3-1.
3-1 overall, and realistically, that's kind of how every match went for Cog Red. And one of the reasons why I do have a small inkling of faith in Dig, but again, not as strong as you'd think, in the way that the semifinals.
Well, it's the first tournament that Dignitas is having to. This is the first time in competitive Smite
that they're playing a new roster.
The Dignitas, has a new roster, and they have to prove something.
That's right.
They are not, by any stretch of the imagination, the favorite team.
No.
It's Cog Red and Cognitive Prime, and then Dignitas and Snipe.
Yep.
So they have something to prove. Are they hungry?
Honestly, I think certain players are, but I don't know if as a team if they're as hungry. Obviously, non-Derek here are extremely hungry. Anytime you get the new guy, around, they're always the hungriest. They want to prove themselves. They want to be walking. I mean, that's the same thing that happened with Weekend on Snipe, right? Weekend came out and said, you know what, guys, I'm new. I just joined Snipe. Let me show you what I can do. And he definitely showed what he could do in the Pro League Kickoff LAN. But as far as Cog Red and Dig, Cog Red is a analytical team, the way they like to play. They think about things, and that's what we saw at the Pro League Kickoff LANs.
Semifinals, they won. They're younger. And they think more.
They lose the first match of the series every single time. The semifinals lost the first match, figured out what Cog Prime was doing, countered it. Then the finals, they lost against Dig in the first match, figured out what they were doing, countered it every single time. They find the strategies, they find the weak lane, and they yank it out from under the team. And so we'll see if Cog Red can do it. Since it's a one-game match, they're going to have to use what they learned at the Pro League Kickoff LAN from ranked ladders, from studying, from research, as well as scrims to figure out what they can do to break apart Dignitas. Now, it's not going to be hard, right? Because they're already a little bit fragmented. They've got a new they've got a new mid, they've got a new support, and of course they've got some swap-ins. Even a new solo. I mean, Shing did not play in the Pro League Kickoff LAN because he was not the original roster when Dig won the qualifiers, and so Shing is now, this is his first actual seeded important match that he gets to play with Dignitas for the first time, so we'll see if even Shing can activate.
Is Shing going to be, like as you mentioned, Cog Red kind of keyed in on Anatoly, put Giannis into that lane, said he's going to scale super aggressively, you're not going to be able to stop him. Is Shing going to be able to stop that style of play? Like, will they be able to just say,
completely different.
Let's go against him?
You got to counter the aggression. The same thing goes for Gars, right? DeGars is a player that if he does not do well early, he does not win. He's just a player that likes to get ahead. If he gets ahead, he's amazing, but he does not play well from behind. I think Shing's the same way. Shing's very emotional, and if you shut him down early, you can stop him from the rest of the game. So I think they're going to do the same thing. But when you have Cog Red and Dig together, you got to shut down Gars, you got to shut down Shing, and then the rest of it kind of comes together. So we'll see what the early game. I feel like the early game, and more so than any match we're going to see this week probably, is the early game's going to be indicative of what the game's going to end up as.
Well, let's move on and take a look at a game that did just finish up. TSM versus Walk It Off here.
Wee-oo.
and which is, of course, Mortality Esports. But this was a very interesting game, and what we really want to hit on here is the matchup between Game Hunter and Sayo.
Yeah.
Sayo looked really good. I mean,
He did.
He didn't die 4 times to arguably the best player in competitive Smite. Well, based on fantasy points, the best player in competitive Smite. Before the start of the season, Game Hunter was the most expensive player to purchase, and a lot of you have him, I would
What a
imagine.
loss.
I think 30% of entrants have
14.
Lasses.
Oh, Lassus, right.
And then 14%
14%
have
have
Game
Game
Hunter,
Hunter.
which is number 2.
Surprisingly enough.
Is he second?
I think he's third.
Third, okay.
I had to double check on the numbers there, but I think he's third. So 14% of the people in the fantasy, which is over 5,000 teams, have Game Hunter, which is weird, right? Because less than 3% had Reels, and Reels just dominated. And so that's just what's so fun about the ESL Fantasy. If you guys have not checked it out yet, we can pop a link up in chat, but that's going to be it. So, look at the lineup here, TSM versus Mortality. And I think that everyone expected TSM to perform, but this is kind of being a theme in Smite competitive esports is these teams that are veteran and have always been the fanfare and have always been the best and really don't have to worry about losing to anyone. They're getting old, and they're getting a little bit slower, and they're getting a little bit weaker, and they're not preparing as much because they're not giving the respect to the players that are putting the work in. Cog Red is a great example. Going into the NA Pro League kickoff land, Cog Prime said, "Oh, Cog Red, they're worse than us. They can't beat us. We're not going to prepare. We're looking directly at the finals." They just skipped the semifinals as if it wasn't a thing, and then they won the first game. They're like, "All right, that's it, locked in." And Cog Red's like, "Nope. You're done, kicked out, we're going to win the entire tournament." And so this is what happens, right? These veteran teams really have to start putting in that extra edge of effort or they're going to keep getting knocked out. TSM's a great example. TSM could not beat it out in the end versus Mortality. And I want to contrast the SK game versus the TSM game. SK ended up losing there, but they lost with a 13K lead. C9 got a one-time massive base push, turned the game around in an instant on a dime. They were still behind, but they were able to get a win. That's very different than Mortality winning the entire game, having a goal lead the entire game, getting every objective, and then winning the match.
Well, let's go move on to the prediction section here, where Drybear and I each have 2 games that we think are going to be locks for the rest of this week. We're going to keep track of this over the next 7 weeks and see who comes out ahead. I'll go ahead with my first lock. I think that the Dignitas versus Fat Chunks game on Friday is going to be – that's a lock for Dignitas.
Really?
I think that they lose this opening game versus Cog Red. I think that they have another game versus Cog that's going to be a tough game. Maybe they win that, maybe they lose that. And then they go up against their first not top-tier opponent in Fat Chunks, and they're going to look to stretch their legs and really look for the victory there.
That's actually a really great choice. I mean, I think given the fact that Fat Chunks is the lowest ranked in NA, and of course haven't really been performing as long, so they don't have the long-standing history, and Dig, of course, with a new lineup, is a great pickup to go for. My choice, actually, is going to be the one right next to it, Cog Red versus Ratchet or Thirst, the same day on Friday.
Yeah.
I think that Thirst is not ready for Cog Red.
I don't think anybody's ready for Cog Red. That's a tough one, definitely. My second pick, and this one's going to be a little bit more controversial, a lot more to say about it, is I'm taking Coast over Exposed Secrets on Thursday.
Wow.
For sure.
Really?
Yeah, I think that Coast is probably still the most underrated team in the entire league, NA or EU. They did exceptionally well at the launch tournament. It's a great group of guys. They play very well together. They're actually friends in real life, and they live close to each other. They have opportunities to boot camps that other teams do not have. They've been preparing. They're hungry. They also have the best coach in the business in Emil Vichin, I guess is his name.
Emilovichin,
yeah.
That's the name I go
Emilovichin.
Emilizo's so hard to say.
He's an amazing coach for that team, and he does an exceptional job, and I think they're going to be perfectly prepared for Exposed Secrets, who's still going to be working out some kinks. So I take Coast on Thursday as a lock.
Honestly, we talk about Exposed Secrets and how great they are and how well they play. I think that actually my choice is going to be the game on Sunday, which would be Cloud9 versus Coast. I take Cloud9 over that.
You take Cloud9 over
I take
Coast?
Over
Wow.
Coast. After watching them, I think that Cloud9, and here's the thing, right? C9 is still not at that top level.
That's
It's still not
bold.
going to bring it together. But my prediction is that C9 is actually going to conquer Coast on Sunday just because I feel like all the factors that make C9 good are all the holes that are on the side of Coast, right? You got Sayo locked in solo lane, always going to be winning that out. Shadow Nightmare a great mid, but I think Fexes is a little bit better in the way that he handles a wide plethora of problems. Fexes is very good at reacting
Shadow Nightmare
to
definitely has the most to prove, probably out of any of the
right.
European players individually.
That's right. And so I think Fex is going to win that matchup as well. I think Sayo's going to be locked in the solo lane, and I think overall C9's going to win that match, just guaranteed.
Well, there you go. Those are our predictions. And now we'll settle into the final segment here of the base race, where we'll just go through all the rest of the stuff that we have on our minds. First thing coming up for me is, well, let's see. It's definitely Sayo versus Game Hunter looking really, really good. Sayo gave me a lot of fantasy points this week. I had Reels and Sio actually on my team. How did you do in fantasy for the
without a
first couple of round of games?
I'm not doing super
No
well.
support?
I had Reels, of course. Reels did very
Are you conceding
well.
week 1 to me in fantasy?
I have to. I only have 4 players, so I was busy working on things, and I didn't look. After like 5 minutes after the lock, I was like, I'm gonna get a support, and then I couldn't. And so I got 4 players, but of course I had Reels. Ended up had Cuvo, and I think I may have had actually MLC still has to play for me, so I got him for my mid lane selection.
I also have MLC though, so you don't pick up any points over me. Then I have Incon.
So I think you're just locked for the week.
I lock this week and take it away. Looking forward to the next games here coming up at 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. We will have Cog Red versus Dignitas.
Right.
Cog Red's certainly the favorite there, but Fat Chunks versus Cog.
I'm looking at that match. I think the biggest thing is that coming out of the NA Pro League kickoff land, the Cog Prime works mentally is they're going to be super hungry for this match. Not because they have to, we have to win kind of thing as Fat Chunks assemble, but I think for their own personal sake, I feel like they're going to want to just crush them.
It's a great opportunity for MLC Stealth to just do what he does.
They want to do that.
Look for the Alquang pick there.
Alquang.
I think so. I think you're going to see that Alquang pick from Stealth, and it's just going to be he'll pick Alquang, Ra, Zhangque. You're either going to have super safe mid laner for him, just like he always likes to pick. I think it's going to be. You think he'll go Agni?
I think he'll go Agni.
You think they want to go that aggressive? I don't know about that.
I think they're going to go that aggressive. I think that's what they're going to do with this match. They're going to be like, World, we lost in the semifinals for the Pro League kickoff land, but we are still the #1 team in NA. Let us show you what we can do. I think they're going to go Agni on MLC because that's his most aggressive god. He's just going to hit those bombs, and Alquang doesn't really fit into that billet. I think we're going to see like a Vamana on Omega, and he's just come out and just go mid game and just stomp everything. I think they're mad and they're hungry and they're coming out to fight.
Well, guys, that's going to do it for us here on Face Off. Coming up next is going to be Kelly streaming for you guys in her patented, wonderful blue hair and whatever else it is that you like to watch about Kelly here on this Smite Game channel. We will be back just before 7:30 with the pregame show from me and Dry Bear, and then prior to that, you'll have Kelly and Adonis giving you the update on NA and looking forward to EU with their actual pregame show. Don't miss it. Be back here at 7 o'clock for that. Until then, enjoy Kelly. For Dry Bear, I'm Hi-Rez Bart. For all the production staff, thank you guys for tuning in to the European side of this bad boy, and then Face Off in the middle of it. We'll see you in just a couple hours with the North American Smite Pro League here from Atlanta, Georgia.